They obviously didn't release a motive as to why she shot up the school, but I have a pretty good guess. What have Christians been doing lately? They've been banning books about LGBT. They've been discriminating against the LGBT. They are banning drag shows. So people are screaming, oh my God, it's a hate crime against Christians. But how about they are the ones that were bullying her first?
Today, in my criminal justice courses, we discussed the Nashville shooting. And thankfully, my students raised awareness around the fact that a lot of the media is misgendering the shooter. Which, why do we care? They unalived like 6 people, including children. We do not condone that awful behavior, so screw them and everything they're associated with, right? Wrong, because in my area of study, of work, we look at the why. The why, in my opinion, is just as significant, if not more so, than the what. And I can't help but think this trans man targeted a Christian school that he attended, that he may have had very negative experiences at, how much the anti-LGBTQ legislation impacted his mental health to push him to this point.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this Nashville mass shooting again, okay? That really is frustrating for me to talk about, okay? Because I'm going to lose my mind just thinking about some of the mental gymnastics that these leftists are engaged in, trying to make the shooter, okay, of this mass shooting the victim in this situation, okay? When clearly the victims in this situation were the Christian kids and adults, teachers, that were shot and killed by this radical lunatic person, right, who committed this act of violence, right? Again, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it, where we live in a country where a group of people, okay, Christians, can be the victims of a mass shooting. They can get slaughtered. But yet the media and the woke revolutionaries somehow, some way are trying to make the people that are like the shooter to be the actual victims. Extremely frustrating stuff, okay? I'm honestly about to lose my mind. I actually lost my mind last night. Didn't do it on camera to make sure I didn't, do it on camera this morning. So, we're not going to get that moment. But it definitely doesn't help when the President of the United States, when asked about if there's an attack or if the attack was against Christians, he makes a joke about it instead of actually being serious about a very serious situation. Take a look.
Do you believe that Christians were targeted in the Nashville school shooting? Do you believe that Christians were targeted?
I have no idea.
Josh Foley believes they were. What do you say to that?
Well, I probably don't then.
Probably don't.
No, I'm joking. No, I have no idea.
Lord help me. Lord help me with this guy. He has dementia. It's not his fault. So I want y'all to understand. A transgender person goes and shoots up a Christian school, killing kids and adults, all I presume to be Christians. Okay, they work at a Christian school. And the Democrats, Joe Biden, they can't seem to say what it is, which is clearly a targeted attack against Christians. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into this now, right? I want to talk more about this, but first I want to play the reaction from The View, okay, to Josh Hawley's assertion, his hypothesis, which, basically is fact, to be quite honest with you, that this is a targeted attack against Christians. Take a look.
Today, I will introduce a resolution explicitly condemning this massacre as the hate crime that it is and calling upon this body to condemn hateful rhetoric that leads to violence.
Okay, look, some people are using this as an excuse to demonize the transgender community. Crazy stuff. So is this once again, are we just weeing in the wind?
Well, first and foremost, I really want to praise the officers who charged into the building, shots being fired, Rex Engelbert and Michael Collazo. We saw a bravery that unfortunately we didn't see in places like Uvalde. So I just want to thank them for the countless lives that they potentially saved. It's so frustrating. The vast majority of this country wants to see something done. They may disagree on what solving this looks like, But I do think something is important. As the facts have started to emerge from this case, it confirms, once again, that in a mass shooting, this person was struggling with mental health issues.
There are mentally ill people all over the world.
I was
this
just
is the
going to
only
say
country.
that. I'm really sorry. But, you know, I have so many mentally ill people in my family. They are more likely to be the victims of crime than be criminals. That is a fact, and it has been studied in this country for over 60 years. So I'm so sick of people conveniently saying this is a mental health issue, or you can't look at this issue without mental health. This is an AR-15 style weapon issue.
This person was of sound mind?
I don't think
that is
not
the point. The point is, if she did not have access to these weapons, those 3 9-year-olds would be in school today.
Let's start with this. Let's start with this. The AR-15 style rifle needs to go. Period. Period. It needs to go. You cannot hunt with it. There's nothing left after you shot it. We all know what it does. And until that conversation becomes a real conversation that everybody's willing to get on board with, children are going to keep getting shot. People in churches are going to keep getting shot. I heard one guy say, well, you know, this is against the Christians. No, it's not against the Christians, because you would have mentioned it when they went into the black church. And you would have said, this is an issue we should be thinking about, but you didn't. So let's not do that. Let's not make it about transgender people. Let's not make it about anything but what it is. We have a problem with this gun and its accessibility in this country.
Yeah. Okay, so I want you guys to understand what's going on here. The clip that they started with was Josh Hawley saying that, hey, this is an attack against Christianity. Whoopi poses this question to the panel, and that's when the mental gymnastics begins. Okay, this is Olympic level mental gymnastics here, right? They go from talking about mental illness, which to me is pretty, you know, kind of crazy, because, you know, when you talk about transgender people, apparently you're not supposed to say that they're mentally ill. Okay, that's hate speech. You can't say that. But that's what they're throwing out there, right? And then they get into their favorite talking point about guns, okay, and how guns need to be banned, okay, even though in some of the most gun restricted places in this country, we're still seeing a ton of gun violence. But what they avoid at all costs is actually talking about the shooter being trans and how that may have played into why this happened in regards to the trans shooter targeting Christians, right? Were Christians targeted? Was this an attack on Christianity? And what really blows my mind about this is that when it comes to any other situation, like I told you guys, when it fits the narrative, they have no issues whatsoever telling it like it is and talking about the identity of the shooter and how that plays into why this happened and who they targeted. Take a look.
Anna, I know you didn't speak the last time we were talking, so we were talking about the mass shooting.
You know, honestly, I'm so incredibly upset about this. It's almost hard for me to talk. When I heard this news on Saturday, it brought me back to that day in 2019 when another white supremacist, domestic terrorist, racist piece of crap drove hours and hours and hours to go hunt down Latinos in a Walmart and killed 23 people. And it's absolutely the same thing replaying itself over and over again in places that are supposed to be safe, in places where we all go. Now we can't go to the supermarket. We can't go to a theater. No. We can't go to a Walmart. We can't go to church. And so listen, I think it's time to name names and point fingers. Yes. Yeah. Tucker Carlson mentioned the great replacement theory or some version of that more than 400 times on his show since 2016, according to the New York Times. Elise Stefanik bought ads on Facebook. And it's not just them. It's other hosts of Fox News. It's other Republican leaders. And they need to be called out. And listen, if you are an advertiser advertising on that station, you are part of the problem. If you sit on the board and are trying to be a civilized person, Paul Ryan, my friend, I'm talking to you, you are part of the problem. If you're a Republican donor tweeting about how bad you feel about this, but you're donating to people like Elise Stefanik, you are part of the problem. If you are a staffer working for them, you are part of the problem. If you are voting for them, you are part of the problem.
And
So
also-
I'll tell you what great replacement theory should be. We should replace all these people peddling hate and making financial and political gain from spreading racism. We should replace them with people who hold up American values. Right. But last thing I want to say is I want to read the tweet that Liz Cheney wrote today, because I echo this, and every Republican with a conscience should be saying the same. The House GOP leadership has enabled white nationalism, white supremacy, and anti-Semitism. History has taught us that what begins with words ends in far worse. Right. The GOP leaders must renounce and reject these views and those who hold them. Kevin McCarthy, I'm waiting for you.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand. I just showed you how they talk about a mass shooting committed by a transgender person, somebody that doesn't fit the narrative, versus a mass shooting committed by a white person and a white supremacist, okay? They have no problems whatsoever talking about identity. They have no problems whatsoever talking about how that person's identity and ideology played into the mass shooting. They have no problem whatsoever calling on politicians to condemn certain ideology that may have played into the mass shooting. But when it comes to this transgender mass shooting, they don't want to touch it, right? They don't want to talk about, well, is this a hate crime against Christians? Because to me, it sure seems like it. I mean, the police, they aren't releasing a manifesto, probably for the reason why we all know, because that would basically be proof that this was a hate crime against Christians, okay? They've also indicated that, hey, you know, the school being Christian or the person being a former Christian school student played into it. Okay. Yeah, the person definitely had some issues. Okay. Despite what we know, these people, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to talk about the rhetoric that has been going on in this country, the hate and vitriol that has been thrown in the direction of conservatives and Christians about this issue with LGBTQ, right? Because these people, like The View, has spewed nothing but hatred and vitriol towards Christians and conservatives, because Christians and conservatives don't want to sexualize kids, right? I mean, they just had Billy Porter on, the LGBTQ actor, who said that we were at civil war. We were in a civil war over kids getting sex change operations and being exposed to male strippers, aka drag queens. This is what he declared. He declared this on national TV. We're at civil war. And none of these cackling hens can acknowledge that, hey, maybe our rhetoric, maybe us framing this conversation around these laws that have been passed by the GOP as some type of life or death situation for trans kids, maybe that played into this, right? Maybe that played into why this mass shooter, this transgender mass shooter committed this act of violence against Christians. Of course they're not going to touch it, right? Of course they're going to deflect and talk about everything else, mental illness, guns, whatever, right? They're going to talk about everything else instead of what it is, because they're at fault. Blood is on their hands, right? The same way they try to say blood is on the GOP's hands for this, you know, white supremacist out in Buffalo killing black folks, even though, you know, there's no evidence that he actually was right-wing, okay? There's more evidence that he was actually a left-wing white supremacist, which is this, by the way, right? You have communist white supremacists out there, right? The left doesn't want to acknowledge that, okay? But they do. The guy said he hated Tucker Carlson in his manifesto, okay? He didn't like Fox News. He admitted that he's not conservative, but they paint him as conservative anyways for whatever reason. But they were quick, fast, in a hurry to do that when it came to that guy. But when it comes to Christians being murdered, you know, we don't really want to talk about it. Let's just laugh it off and talk about everything else. In fact, you have these people on the left going as far as to blame Christians, right? If they're not completely deflecting and not talking about it, they're actually blaming Christians. Oh, it's you Christians' fault because you guys want to pass this hateful anti-LGBTQ legislation. So then they're victim blaming, right? They're victim blaming. Again, ain't it amazing how things come full circle for the left all the time? How, again, their mental gymnastics takes them to a place where, again, the hypocrisy is just outright stunning. They are victim blaming. They're blaming Christians for a mass shooting that happened in there? Well, you should have passed these LGBTQ hate laws. What happened? Right? Oh, well, you shouldn't be so soft on gun control. What happened? Your fault. Absolutely amazing stuff. Instead of just acknowledging the issue for what it is, in my opinion, which is that this was an act of hate committed by some individual who's probably radicalized by the rhetoric coming from the left in regards to them lying about the GOP legislation and LGBTQ rights. Because no LGBTQ rights are being infringed on, period. Nobody's losing their rights. But if you listen to the left, you are, right? Not only are you losing LGBTQ rights, you're losing voting rights. You Negroes gonna be back in chains, right? All that stuff gonna happen, right? According to the left. Absolutely amazing stuff, man. These people have blood on their hands, and for as much as they want to hold the GOP accountable for not being tough on gun control or racism or white supremacy, they actually really need to look at themselves and hold themselves accountable for woke supremacy and how much damage and violence that's caused this country, because the number one domestic terror threat to this country, the number one threat to this country domestically, is unequivocally woke supremacy, progressive far left ideology. That's the biggest threat to this country, and it's not even close. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.